Okay, believe it or not, we're still in the 7-point mind trading. 19th session. We're on the third point. So we're just plowing through quickly. And yeah, we covered a couple sessions ago about how to really learn a text like this and how we really spend time on it and how we go through 3 wisdoms, the idea of learning it and then contemplating it, sitting with it, challenging it, testing it. Does it work? Does it not work? Applying it. Does this make sense? Does it not make sense? Does that hold up? And so, each week I'm hoping that people spend a little time trying some of this out. Does it work? Does it hold up? And see if we can find something that does or doesn't work. And that way, when we learn something, it's something that makes sense in a way that is adaptable to our real life. It goes, oh yeah, I see where this is the cause of suffering. I see where this is helpful practice. And then out of that realization, we get to meditate and just really sink it down from a philosophical idea to something that really is a way that I'd like to live and make sense in meaningful ways. So, no need to rush through these things. Right? Kale, slowly, slowly, with no time to waste. So, if anyone did have any questions from last week, I'd pause for a moment. We're in the calm in the storm. For those of you online, there's big winds around here. Okay, well, so within the third point, transforming adversity onto the path, we're at, blame everything on one thing. And I like simple things. You just narrow down all the problems to one thing. Self-cherishing attitude. Wow, that just makes a lot of sense. Now I know, am I doing something that reinforces that and doing something that is allowing me to be more realistically connected, interdependently to this life that we engage in? Or am I really thinking about John first? And when I think about John first, the suffering result from that. And where is this John first that I'm so trying to nurture and hold on to and drag around with me all the time? Take good care of, entertain. So we spent a great deal of time sort of unpacking the idea of interdependence, and we went through in step 2 a real deeper understanding. We're here at this point really identifying that underneath, if we trace down all these mentally afflicted states, we're going to find pretty much it's concerned with me, John, more important than anything else, and in a way that isn't in a realistic context with everything else. Rather than being the center of the universe, it turns out I'm actually just part of it. And as intellectually we can get that, we quickly become the center of our universe. And we know how things ought to be. And we get very frustrated and worried and fearful when it doesn't line up the way I would like it to be. So we've gone through this for a few weeks now. I believe we'll wrap tonight on this. And so we'll pick up the text right here. Self-centeredness does not vanish by itself. We will continue to suffer because of the mental distortions and unwholesome behavior that it spawns. It is not difficult to understand how self-centeredness harms us, and yet, if we look around us, we can ask in the quiet of our mind, how many people out there, let alone other kinds of sentient beings, have really recognized the extent to which self-centeredness and its resulting distortions bring them harm, discontent, anxiety, grief, and pain? How many, on the contrary, base their lives firmly on the priority of self-centeredness and identity with attachment, confusion, and hostility, as if this were the only natural and proper way to live. Very few people have even a glimmering of the profound disadvantages that these mental distortions hold for us. I'm just making a point that out of 7 billion other human beings out there, most people just, no, that's the way life is. And they're stuck, right? Stuck in a game that they can't win, in a game that doesn't make sense and it doesn't add up. And a game where we just keep thinking that, I'll be happy if only. And boy, I'll be better when. Yeah, I know we've had some tough patches, but if I get this job, I'm going to start that stuff, as soon as I get this next project done. And man, I can't wait for that next retreat. On the way home from the retreat, you're thinking, boy, I can't wait for that next retreat. This was good. Or that this constant state of discontent, constantly looking for something out there that's going to make me feel good. And when I find it, finding some way to hold it, to preserve it, to nourish it, to make it stable, consistent, and reliable. But does such a thing exist? And that's what we want to seek. Is there something out there that can do that? As we investigate, we'll find that you can have the best moment in your life to be followed by some pretty rabid discontent and upsetness. And you can have a lot of suffering to be followed by joy. But these transient nature of things that are interdependent with just fleeting moments, and always trying to grasp onto, somehow managing all of that out there in a way that I won't get sick, I won't get injured, my family will be okay, we won't need therapy, nobody's going to have an accident, and I'm going to live till X amount of years, and it'll all be fine. And most people don't even question that isn't the way it ought to be. And they also don't question that they can somehow find happiness that way. I mean, if you go out on the streets and they've got all these, what's happiness? What's happiness mean to you? How do you get it? And there's a documentary called Happy. Anybody see that? Yeah, it's great. They went out and it's all this idea around success and money and things and all that. And yet, as we look around, we can see people with money, acclaim, accomplishment, very discontent, very sad. Our therapeutic processes in this country are ripe with clients. We've got depression, we've got stress, we've got people dying younger, we've got all of these things that have given rise that are just robbing people from any sense of well-being based on a misperception about the source of happiness. And it won't be found in a self looking out for me and mine. Just not going to be found there. Self-cherishing attitude is really going to give rise to that idea. Looking out for we and ours, well, we might find some happiness. Finding out that I'm a part of something, interdependent with all other things, and asking a different question, which is the suggested assignment, is noticing when afflictive states arise, stress, worry, fear, anxiety, some anger, frustration, asking a question instead of, what's in it for me, or how can I make it better for me? A different question. Given this situation, how can I be helpful? How can I be helpful for all of us? Like, if it wasn't, what's the best thing I can do for everybody concerned? letting go of my attached view on how something can be, how would that shift things? And it's a very different way of living when we start realizing we're a part of something and start asking this question about, as everything arises, what's the healthiest, most meaningful way to interact with the world and samsara as it arises in this moment, in the context it is right now, without what's in it for me, what's in it for us, what's in it for our community. So he's making a point here of how few actually get to even question that idea. Because especially in this culture, right? That's what you got. There's accomplishment. We're really big on putting letters after our names. You know, initials and stuff. Remember one of the business cards I got in the corporate world, right? Everybody, well, what initials you got? You know, let's put those up there. And these things that we put on the walls. And so there's a real sense that I'm not somebody unless I've done this or done that, or have this or have that. And yet, fundamentally, being raised in our culture, we're taught about caring for others, about sharing, about compassion. I mean, that's what we're taught. That's in all the stories we're told. And then our commercials say, but you'll be really cool when you get this car, or that job, or this cool new toy. Tell me that's a food that's ripe. All right. So he's making a point here, because when we think about a rare and precious human rebirth, not all humans have that potential that says, there's something wrong here. This isn't adding up. There's something deeper. What he's saying? That they don't even have a glimmer of the idea that what's really causing the source of my anger, frustration, resentment, stress, worry, and fear is my self-centeredness, which is different than self-esteem. If you actually have some self-esteem, you don't have to worry about being self-centered, because you don't need to be the center of the universe. You're already okay with yourself. So this is not feeling good about yourself. It's actually, if you feel good about yourself, you don't need to be so self-centered. When we actually discover worthiness and value and recognize our Buddha nature, you're not competing with anybody. You don't need to tell everybody all your stories. You don't need to be caught up or transactionally interacting with others about what they have to offer me or not. So it's not a sense of unworthiness or anything. It's just a realistic view that we're one among many, and everything that I appear to be is always independence upon the current situation, who's here, everything that's arisen in the moment, and whatever appears as John in this moment, is momentary, comes and goes. But that continuity of interdependence allows an opportunity to engage with others in ways that are meaningful and productive, and actually develop worthiness and value that are meaningful. Qualities of compassion and care give rise to genuine happiness and well-being. Qualities of anger, resentment, and comparisons, that gives rise to a lot of afflicted mental states. It's not so good. Not so good. But he's making this point that most of us, when we are caught up or triggered, we're looking for something to blame. And it's always out there somewhere. If that could be fixed, or if that person thought, or they didn't do that. And it would be more accurately pointed here. Because anger, resentment, jealousy, and frustration are mental states. And the seeds of those mental states are in my consciousness. And everything out there is a condition that can ripen or give rise to the seeds that get triggered for anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration. But that's here, not there. And it's always arising, grasping onto a sense of self that wants things a certain way, that's very self-concerned. to a self that, as we explored earlier, doesn't actually quite exist the way we perceive it. So that's a whole lot of intellectual thinking. But in a very practical way, what happens when you don't think about you first? How much suffering did you just eliminate? You didn't think about what somebody thought about you, or what your boss may think about this thing, or if you have to say I'm sorry, or what is it I have to defend? Do I have to defend my beliefs? What is it that I'm always in competition with? What is it that... What would it be like if I just was one among many, and everyone out there was an opportunity to grow, and everyone out there is the cause for my enlightenment, and that everything I have in my life is a direct result of all the interactions I have with others and the environment I get to live in. How would that be different? For one, I would suggest it's accurate. The other one isn't. What makes anything mine? So, he's making this point that you've cracked the door, and very few have. And to not take it lightly. Not take it lightly. Encountering a teaching such as this may be the first opportunity in all of our lifetimes to really tackle this problem. Not that Tibetan Buddhism has a monopoly here. You'll see these same types of teachings in other philosophies and religions. But the fact remains that this particular text, offers an exceptionally clear elucidation of the nature of self-centeredness and the manner in which it harms us. Not only does it identify this, which is a major step in itself, but it then offers us the means to counteract this deep-rooted malady. As we begin to make an effort, we may quickly become discouraged and feel that it is not really possible to counteract self-centeredness. We may wilt at the thought. My neural circuits are so conditioned to self-centeredness that I just cannot escape the pattern. It feels like self-centeredness has us well in its clutches and is firmly in control. After all, it has been a very long time it has had a very long time to embed itself in our psyches. The results will be gradual as we counteract the conditioning of our mental, verbal, and physical behavior. So, all too often people may go, this makes totally perfect sense. And you'll work on that one day. Because doesn't it pop up in a mind like, it just seems impossible sometimes. How can I really care that much about it? How can I really get out of thinking about me first? How can I get my needs met if I'm not worried about getting my needs met? And yet, it doesn't say that you shouldn't get your needs met. It says you shouldn't get them met in a self-centered way. And so what falls through the cracks sometimes is the idea that something makes totally logical sense, and is a nice, interesting conversation, never gets translated into an opportunity to actually change my life, because it seems like something out there for other people that maybe some great, enlightened being can do. But I'm just John. How can I be like the Dalai Lama? Right? And the Dalai Lama will tell you nothing other and no less than. And one of the lamas of our tradition, Dilpo Khyentse Rinpoche, he said the number one reason Westerners that he's taught, there aren't more of them that have reached enlightenment, is simply their lack of faith in themselves. That's the biggest obstacle. That we don't think that that's even something we can do. And, it makes sense in the sense that we didn't grow up our whole life being taught that we have Buddha nature, that we have all the enlightened qualities within us, it's just obscured, and that this samsara is a bunch of mentally afflicted patterns of karma and klesha that just is blocking all these qualities that manifest and are there and intrinsically a part of who we are. And so we don't come in with that perspective, so it's a little harder to get there. And then if somebody tells you that and they look very different and they sit on a throne and they're, they look like, Dalai Lama or something, you go, well, I get he can get it, but, I'm still John. And so the urging here is to say, you have a rare and precious human worth. You have all the qualities for enlightenment right now. There's nothing missing. There's nothing lacking. And all of the same qualities of enlightenment are in you, that are in me, that are in all things. It's all there. And it actually shows up frequently. It does show up frequently. We don't often give ourselves credit for that. We're really focused on when it doesn't show up. But there are all these times in our lives where we were selfless, when we were really kind and pure, your highest quality, your more natural state. Your more natural state is available. You'll see it in times of crisis, in times of tragedy. You'll see it show up. There's a quote I'm coming up upon right now, And what he's saying, my habits, my conditioning, it's the way I am, whether I'm a morning person, it's just second nature to me. Right? I think it is second nature. And then Lama will point out, it's not your first nature. It's not your first nature. It's your second nature. Your first nature is this pure awareness that then gives rise to all these other things. It's just not who we are. But we really identify with that. We identify with anger, resentment. I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm this, I'm that. And then anger and all that goes. And then who's there? Because I was angry. That I is gone. Well, who's here? Who's here? We have these qualities. We have them. And it's easy to get discouraged because there's no 180 degree boom. It's all, I got it, had the teaching, ready now, going to be a Buddha, walk out the door. And man, that attachment thing, it was such a drag. I'm so over that. And I've taken my bodhisattva vows. I'm good to go. And then all of a sudden I have mental afflictions. It's fascinating. When I became a monk, you take these vows as a monk. It's a really, really precious opportunity. And when there's this idea of merit, right? Merit is this spiritual force, energy that rides with you out of good, virtuous activity with a spiritual goal in mind. And so, there's quite a bit of merit usually in offering to a monk. And there's more merit offering to a monk whose vows are pure. So about the only time a monk's vows are pure is right after they've taken them. So as I'm walking out the door, there's these people making offerings right there. And because, my vows are going to be pretty distorted, pretty quickly. I don't know if I made it back to my room before, the mental afflictions arose and things, but they're hitting offerings. So taking vows, becoming a monk, those things don't erase mental afflictions. They don't clear away all that messiness that's obscuring our recognition of reality. And it's a gradual gradual process. And so that's where I think, we've really emphasized the idea of making steady progress that's tangible, because it's really hard to do this if it's some idea out there. It's much more effective to test it. Does this work? Am I less angry when I'm like this? If I think of others more, how's that affect? If I change my perspective or attitude about what's happening right now, will that change how I feel about it? You know, if I think more about we instead of I, does that change things? And we start testing it, and we start getting tangible results right away. You can start getting tangible results right away. You know, just even having the attitude that, you know, everyone you meet is someone that's like an old dear friend and worthy and valuable, or an enlightened being ready to help you. I mean, how would that shift? How would that feel? How would your interactions change? So we actually need to put it into practice, to get some ground, to, you know, yeah, this works, this makes sense. Then I'm going to be good for a long haul. You know, I'm going to be good for a long haul if I make steps that make progress, that make sense, and I have some result. But if I have the idea that in a few weeks or a few months, or a lot of people go to meditate and somehow think that, you know, hey, I put in a month, you know, I should be laser-like focused. You know, it's probably not going to work out so well. But because there's this tendency that we have a tendency to say, well, here's how I am today, and here's who I want to be. Right? Dalai Lama, Buddha, whatever. And then I keep falling short. I wonder why, you know, I wonder why. What if I were to compare who I am today with who I was 2 years ago? I might see some progress. I might see, oh, yeah, no, I'm a lot calmer. I'm a lot less reactive. You know, yeah, I still have my thing, but it's less. And now we can start seeing, if I look backwards, I can start seeing this progress. And that's actually based in reality, as opposed to something that I'm not. So he said, don't get discouraged. Remember, this is a steady, gradual progress. And he made, he alluded to, and it's interesting, I'm not sure that Setchu Pua's in his ancient text talked about neural pathways, but he may have, I don't know. That they're embedded, you know, that our habits, our conditions are really strong. But, you know, our science has shown you can change that. You can actually create new neural pathways. I mean, things shift, things change. You can do it. You can actually do that consciously, on purpose. So, he's making a point that it's easy to get discouraged and see something as out there for others or unobtainable for me. And that's a view we really need to let go of. And go, you know, I can get better. I can get better. If that makes sense, if this makes sense, whether I get there or not, if this can improve my life, you know, why not? And I will tell you that there are, following a path like this, things that seem inconceivable, that don't make sense, that are hard to understand, will start to make sense. It's kind of like the building blocks of math, you know. You gotta do these first parts. The engineer over here gets excited. Math? You talking about math? Not much. But there are building blocks. Right? And I'm not going to understand this level of math unless I've done this foundational math. But as you do it, as you ripen up, the karmic potentials, those tendencies really ripen, and there's much more realization, understanding in the text. It starts unlocking. Any questions at this point?
I'll ask one.
Yep.
Can you talk about the idea of progress and it being a potential hindrance as well?
Absolutely.
Like an outcome.
Yeah, because we want to achieve. Progress, actually I don't know that progress is so much a hindrance. Being attached to progress could be. Because, you know, what happens is we can get spiritual pride. You know, that's a big one. Spiritual pride. And then you can't even admit when you got angry. You can't admit that you're this or that. How many times you talk to just somebody who says they're really angry, you go, hey, you should calm down. I'm not angry. I don't know. You can't look at angry. But we can get caught up in these traps. I'm a Buddhist practitioner. I meditate every day. We got all of our how I ought to be and how I carry myself. We're not like that. And it actually is such, it cuts down any ability to learn. It actually projects, again, self-centeredness. So progress then easily leads to a self-centeredness thing in that view. And so it always needs to be held lightly in a way that is more in accordance how things are. Everything about Buddhism is about coming back to reality. And so as we make progress, and it happens, you'll see quite frequently that some people make some progress, and then they can't look deeply at their own mistakes. Can't say I'm wrong, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, or somebody needs to see me like this, and then I carry that around, and then if somebody doesn't treat you like that, then there's an offense, and so there's that potential. So that's along the lines of progress, and I was immediately tying your question more along to the idea of achievement, which is seeking to achieve. I'm not sure which way you intended it, but that works. Okay. Is the problem that comes is that if another way of progress is I think I'm not making progress. Okay, that is a very deceptive thing that arises frequently. I get to work with these people over a year, and they're on their path, and they've been meditating 6 months or something like that, and they'll say, "Boy, I'm just not making any progress here. I mean, I sit down and meditate, and my mind still goes all over the place, and this and that." I say, well. That's blue. So, that's exactly what I say. So, you've been meditating. Now let me ask you, how is your relationships? Are you more reactive? Are you less reactive? Does your mind get caught up in rumination during the day? Do you worry much? No, that's way down. Well, that's what the meditation's doing, is you have more ability to be aware and not caught up in all those cycles. You're not gauging your meditation on how focused you are. You're really, how's it applying to your life and working with your mental afflictions. Well, that's a different thing. I started to notice that. And then they'll say other things like, boy, I still notice I get frustrated. And so they'll write that down as an unskillful thing. Unskillful, I got frustrated. And I'll say, well, did you act out on that frustration? Well, of course not. Well, maybe you need to put that in the skillful column instead of the unskillful column. Because in the past, when you got frustrated, what happened? Well, I yelled at people. Okay. Now, frustration arises and I don't yell at people. Skillful column. Because now I know that it's a temporary thing of frustration arising and not. So a lot of times, and what I've noticed working with people that, over a period of time, they're making incredible progress. It's unseen because some illusory idea of how they ought to be. And things that we view as skillful actually might be very skillful. I didn't yell at someone. I didn't act out. How many things are you doing skillful here? And if throughout that day, how many things did you do well or at least neutral? And how many things did you do that were unskillful? 2, 3, 4 compared to 200. We start noticing that there's this deceptive way of progress in the sense that we don't even see our progress. We don't see our progress. And then when we make a mistake, we beat ourselves up. Did a whole compassion retreat, and I'm frustrated. Forgetting I just did a whole compassion retreat. And, I cultivate a lot of compassion. And I'm still apparently have some human mental afflictions. You know, so that's another really good way that we get ourselves in trouble with, try, because we can put where's the check marks? Well, if we're not looking at what we're measuring properly with some objectivity and clarity, it'll create problems, because again, we keep having this idea that I should be better than I am, or somehow. The results will be gradual as we counteract the conditioning of our mental, verbal, and physical behavior. At the same time, the results of skillful efforts are manifest, and we can experience them right here in this lifetime. So he's making the point I was just elaborating on. Skillful actions are going to have results right away. We just really need to understand, though, that this is a path that we engage in. And if I've spent, just think in a day, how much is your mind on a self-centered attitude? Just in one day. And how much is your mind in Dharma practice, or seeing the world as it is, interdependently as it's arising? A little bit to a whole lot, I'm pretty sure. Probably. So how's this little bit going to counteract all that? And if I only do it, a night here, a little time in the morning, it's the analogy I learned a long time ago. It's like just having a mountain of dung and I've got a little spoon chipping away, and you can get a bigger spoon. I don't have to limit it to 15 minutes in the morning and and a Dharma talk once a week. I can get a bigger spoon. I can start during the day. Making time to remember. Here's a day that will never come again. I'm part of something, not the center of something. Just bringing thoughts to mind. Little things, little reminders. You slap them. I have a friend sticks it right on the car. A new one each day on the car steering wheel, because she has to drive to meetings. And that way it's fresh, it's new, it's a reminder, I think just a good reminder I'm not the center of the universe. That's pretty good right there. That's a big spoon right there. I'm not the center of the universe. And my happiness is not dependent on others meeting my needs. There's a couple, boom, put those around. So we can get bigger spoons. We can bring this into our day more realistically and in practical ways that make a difference, manifest now. And notice when we go back to those. But we don't waste time trying. That's another thing. Sometimes people talk about 2 steps, what's that? 1 step forward, 2 steps back, right? Yeah, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Now, that's not scientifically proven. I'm not even sure. I don't think I read it exactly in the text, so I'm stepping out of that box for a minute. Because everything I say here has to be, pure lineage stuff. This is a Johnism. Side off. Okay, Johnism. May not make any sense to anybody. But it's a John. It helps me. It helps me. It's a something I test, I believe, not verifiable. But I find it helpful. So I'll leave it there. But I don't believe that I'm ever taking a step forward and falling back. I don't think there's ever non-progress every time that I get up and I move in the direction. When I screw up, anything that goes on. I think of it more as, I'm on the path, and sometimes the path gets to be a cliff. And it feels like I'm not getting anywhere. But I keep getting up, and I keep getting up. And at some point, I get to go forward again. Well, now I'm a little higher on my path. I didn't go backwards, though. And for me, that makes sense. It's that as soon as I notice how I messed up, as soon as I notice that, I just recommit to, okay, well, now I can do better. And in that sense, I don't feel like I'm going backwards. I feel like, I've made some progress. Just didn't feel like it went far. So it's not stepping back, just the path gets kind of straight up, or a cliff or a mountain, and I don't seem to be going very far. But when I come out the other side, what I have found in my experience now, through my tenure of practice, is that on the other side, I'm actually further along than if I had just been walking straight. Yeah. Coasting doesn't get you very far. Up the mountain. Yeah. So anyway, that was a Johnism. Back. It makes sense. Use it. If we take this seriously as a profoundly meaningful way to vanquish self-centeredness in our lives and to cultivate loving concern for others, it becomes a central feature in our aspirations and value system. It continues throughout this lifetime as an orientation, even if at the end of this life we still have a considerable amount of self-centeredness left. So he's just saying we're not wasting this. If it's wrapped in bodhicitta, if it's wrapped in the great compassion, this is a momentum. These are potentials that we keep watering. This is an inertia that we're building. And as we've noticed with any other habit that we're developing, they're strong. This can be that strong potential that can carry us right into, even if we're not done in this life, it's just going to ripen in the next continuum. Nevertheless, a current is established that in all likelihood will continue building momentum. In the next lifetime, it will be easier, insofar as we have made effective efforts in this lifetime. How many lifetimes it takes depends upon the skill, the intelligence, the continuity of practice. If we dabble at it casually and intermittently, it will obviously take longer. But it is also possible to overcome self-centeredness in this very lifetime and to become a bodhisattva. And I would argue the point that this lifetime will become better. Because you're automatically eliminating suffering in this lifetime. Mental, emotional suffering. Can't not. So you reap it either way in this lifetime, whether you make it to enlightenment or not. Because if it's not working that way, we're not doing the Dharma properly. The system's not working. Yeah, so that for me has been an incredibly important practical aspect of this path, that practice these principles immediately makes your life better and makes samsara, my experience of it, much less unbearable. I wonder if I want to use that word. I don't want to use that word. Creates less suffering in samsara. I don't think I ever want samsara to not be unbearable. I'm trying to make it unbearable and actually become a Buddhist. Side note on that, people are looking at me like, what's that ways? So the entry into Buddhism is renunciation. I mean, a really visceral understanding of the suffering nature of samsara that's so unbearable that every moment of every day I am focused on being liberated from all this mental and emotional afflictive states of cyclic rebirth. So unbearable. It's good to have it. To abhor it is even the ideal. And it's funny because once it's unbearable, you can bear it. It's funny how that works. Because you're not trapped by it. The new shinies don't seem so shiny. And the glow here is so much better than all that. You don't get hooked and trapped by all that distraction. That's the source of suffering. So within the fivefold path of Buddhism, entry into is renunciation. Yeah. And we're at the very last sentence of this, or last little verse of this. Blame everything on one thing, gradually or swiftly. It is an effective means to counteract self-centeredness and end this source of misery, strife, and anxiety. Until we do, there's no question that it will continue endlessly. So he did make a point, you get a bigger spoon. If you work harder, if you do things, you're going to get better result. But if it's just a hobby, it's hard to get anywhere. It's just a hobby. Yeah. So you guys feel inspired? A little bit? All right, 3 of you are. That's awesome. We're on a roll. You have a rare and precious human rebirth and the opportunity to obtain complete liberation and help all sentient beings. That's pretty cool. Not a bad job. And so within this text then, we just wrapped up that section, is just see if in your life there isn't any form of mental or emotional suffering you have that isn't somehow tied with you feeling more important than all others or any others. See if you can find it. If it's not directly related to that self-cherishing about how I think it ought to be, as though I am the divine part of the universe that says, when I go through Glenwood and the bridge is closed, I shouldn't have traffic. Yeah. And there'll be a bunch of other people in traffic. And then you'll be their traffic. And yet we'll sit there and think about how it's such an inconvenience to me. Man, why couldn't they do that bridge earlier? Or why, yeah. So anyway, all that stuff. How is it always related to how I just want things to be? I want things to be. Yeah. So I invite you this week to really kind of, bear that in mind. Make that a practical, the second wisdom of contemplation. Notice those things. All right, we'll do our dedication, and then I think we've got a lot of food sitting over there. So community and food. So let us take a moment to do our dedication. Let us dedicate the merit and wisdom that we have accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes, both individually and collectively. We dedicate this for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and find lasting happiness. And may we be able to use the merit and wisdom accumulated here in this lifetime to purify our own minds, to recognize our Buddha nature, to awaken with bodhicitta, so we can truly be a benefit to all sentient beings. All right, thank you all so much. A joy. And thank you for joining us online. Be well and try to stay out of trouble. Yeah.